Well, good morning, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone from around the Pacific Rim and our friends. Welcome to today's workshop, co-hosted by the Chinese University of Hong Kong and APRU. My name is Shally Fan. I am the Director of Academic Links at the Chinese University of Hong Kong. Joining me today is Jackie Wong, the Director of Network Programs at APRU. Please note that we have a auto transcription enabled, so if you need it, please do turn it on. If you are using social media today or tomorrow or next few days and would like to share information about the workshop, please tag at APRU 1997 and #APRU on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, at CUHK Global and #CUHK on Twitter, and of course your own tags. Today's workshop includes 5 case studies, presentations from universities that have contributed to the co-curricular program of the APRU Virtual Student Exchange Program. We will then have an opportunity to ask questions to our 5 presenters before we break up into 4 groups to discuss what works, what doesn't, and to share ideas. And then we will have a rapporteur from each of the 4 groups reporting back to the main group. To kick off today's workshop, I would like to invite Professor Suk-Ying Wong to give us an opening remark. Professor Wong is Associate Vice President, Professor of Sociology and Director of Admissions and Financial Aid at the Chinese University of Hong Kong. Professor Wong has extensive teaching experience in Hong Kong, US, and Japan, and has received major research grants on her work on the sociology of higher education. Professor Wong is a well-known figure in Hong Kong in the higher education sector and has served on many education bodies. Professor Wong, please.
Thank you, Shally. Finally, my turn. Oops. All right. First of all, repeat again, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all colleagues from across the Pacific Rim today. I'm very honored to be able to welcome all of you today to share experiences and the best practices for developing co-curricular programs to support virtual mobility. This is something that we know because of the pandemic that has compelled us to adopt and adapt to, as we try also to maintain the momentum for international student mobility, despite all these travel restrictions. Next slide, please. As part of our effort to continue this international mobility, the APRU Virtual Student Exchange Program, as you can see on the screen now, it was launched in last August. The program totally allows students from APRU member universities to benefit from the very, very extensive academic courses. I have to tell you, very extensive. And the unique teaching from now 19 economies represented by the association. Besides this, we also recognize the importance of many of the out of classroom activities, which in fact, when our students come to us, come to this campus or go to your campus, they will also be able to experience. And we wanted to try to find out how can we do it meaningfully? How can we do it also for the students that they will just take home with it the same kind of cultural experience that they would have experienced when they go onto a physical campus. So this is the whole idea of developing the VSE co-curricular programs component of part of the VSE as a co-curricular program. We open this to all students across the APRU network. As these co-curricular programs, they bear no academic credit. I have to repeat, they bear no academic credit at all. So they actually allowed flexibility for students across the network to meet in a more casual setting. Because it is non-credit bearing sort of program activities. The other drawback that we thought it might be, could be students could be very half-hearted, or they could have enrolled and not show up at all, or they could have what we call very lukewarm to freezing, not enrolled the cultural programs at all. Because I've been hearing this term Zoom fatigue recently, very, very much from many of my students as well. But I am very, very happy because this is very, very, and not just satisfactory, they are just very excellent to me. The result is I'm very pleased to report that between last year, September 2020, and March 2021 this year, so as of last month, we have actually developed 42 co-curricular programs, and they all offered by 13 universities and with over 900 student participation. So this is a very, very encouraging figure. Now, these numbers, in a way, that they debunk what I have or what I would have been worried about. These numbers, they not only demonstrate the participating universities' commitment to offering all these very enriching international educational experiences to our students during the pandemic. But they also perfectly demonstrated the desire and the enthusiasm from the students to connect with the global peers at these very challenging times. Now, all of these co-curricular programs, as you can see on the screen, they were all tailored to cater to one or more of our 4 areas. So looking at all these 4 areas, they all aim at offering students new encounters that will fulfill, first of all, our cultural immersion. And you can see in the first icon, cultural, they're culturally oriented. Global leadership. In terms of career, we also wanted to prepare them for future industry, practice skills. So we also developed some co-curricular courses for students to plan their career better. So if you call it career planning. And the last one was very important, social engagement. Now, the social engagement, they were the aspects that actually formed the very important part of for our students to networking among themselves, get to know new friends, and again, get to know perhaps a culture that they would later on develop some interest in, and perhaps we will be able to bring them to your and our physical campus as well. Now, since our launch, students, they have been able, like I said, they have been also able to develop friendship and networks through the 4 core domains of our co-curricular programs. For example, they could do something like practicing foreign languages in activities such as this one that you can see on the screen, offered by Waseda University. They can interact with fellow students globally through activities such as the one that called Stories from Around the World. This one is also hosted by the University of San Francisco de Quito. Now, we also have, I'm just walking you through to some of these very interesting co-curricular courses under the domain of culture that you will see why and how our students have been responding to all these courses. We also have developed a course that we will bring our students to a sort of a first-hand through virtual tours. So this one you can see is a real-time cultural walk in the old time of Hong Kong, hosted by my university, the Chinese University of Hong Kong. And we also have talks offered by Universidad Indonesia on the diverse Indonesian culture. There was even a Disney virtual theme park hosted by the University of Santa Cruz, where participants could enjoy a walk in the world famous theme park through interactive videos. Now, what about what we call, the very cultural artifacts into that region of the world, for example, Asia? And Hong Kong has been very known for dim sum. And if you go around to Chinatown everywhere in your country, in elsewhere, we all try to go to Chinatown, first of all, for some dim sum. And dim sum is also very popular here in Hong Kong. So the pandemic has also forced us to try to be a bit more creative and think out of the box. So the participant universities, we have all been very extremely creative. So last week here, my colleagues here in CHK, we organized actually a virtual cooking class where participants, they could all get together to learn to make dim sums. This is a real-time program last week. Again, last month, Tohoku University from Japan, they took the participants to a very famous sake brewery in Japan and explore the etiquette of sake tasting. I was very tempted to enroll in the course as well. Sake is absolutely my favorite throughout the day and not just in the evening. Let me tell my Japanese colleagues. Okay, now apart from the leisure activities, students, they also had the opportunity to prepare their global careers, as I mentioned earlier on. So they work with top career counselors from one of Asia's financial hubs. Hong Kong, we through career planning sessions and learn about ways to build, most importantly, their self-esteem, confidence in well-being sessions. This is also offered by the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. And it was a very, very successful program offered by our Hong Kong sister institution, the University of Science and Technology. Now, we go on to see another one. They also learn how to become global learner, building a foundation for leadership in our interconnected world by taking part in a global learners program hosted by UC Davis. They had the opportunities to understand contemporary issues from a global perspective through engaging in events under the Corona Crops Global Learning Community, which was led by the University of Oregon, and very, very contesting, but also very constructively thought-provoking. The Black Lives Matter talks hosted by UCLA. I was in that one as well. It was extremely intellectually exciting and got students into more of their real critical thinking. All right. Now, I wanted just to tell you how positive and how encouraging these feedbacks are from my students. So far, the students who have participated in our curricular programs. So what we did was we did a student survey at the end of last year. The students rated the co-curricular programs, as you can see, 8.9 out of 10. On the scale of 10. Students demonstrated, very importantly, they valued the direct interaction with the program hosting universities, and they felt the experience was unique, authentic, and extremely meaningful, let alone very leisurable as well. So what are we going to do? What are we trying to look forward? So looking forward, the virtual student exchange program, it is our best hope that traveling abroad will be able to resume soon, as we can actually see now the beam of hope. The VSC really has laid the foundation for international education and student mobility, as it has been demonstrated as a practice model to diversify the ways that we can engage our students and how universities can deliver an international educational experience to our students. The workshop today, I hope, is a perfect occasion where we can think ahead as to how these experiences we have gathered in the past 9 months can be beneficial to planning interesting and rewarding learning experience ahead for our students. At this point, I really would like to thank my heartfelt thanks to our APRU Secretariat, to colleagues of the VSE Central Office here at CUHK, who have been working very closely together and with me to launch all these very successful programs in VSE. And again, our 5 presenters today for making, hopefully they will be able to make today's workshop possible, constructive, and leisurable for them as well. So I would stop here and I would like to say thank you to you all again.
Thank you, Professor Wong. We'll now move into presentations by our 5 presenters. They are from Korea University, Tohoku University, the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology, University San Francisco de Quito, and finally UC Davis. Please feel free to raise questions in the chat box or during the Q&A time directly. Now, to start, the students have been missing the opportunity to experience student life abroad, and Korea University has organized a tour of its beautiful campus, but from a student perspective. So let's hear from Mr. Xianghun Yang and Mr. Darcy Archenberg from the Office of International Affairs on the event. Darcy and Mr. Yang, please.
Thank you, Shelley. I am Seung-Yeon Yang, manager of the APRU VSC program at Korea University. I'm joined today by my colleague, Darcy.
Hello, I'm Darcy Drakenberg. I also work in the Office of International Affairs. I'm the coordinator for APRU for our president and vice president's participation.
We'll be delivering our short presentation together as we both worked on the project. We decided to jointly deliver this presentation so that we could both share with you feedback and what we learned from the experience. So it's been challenging for everyone working in the internationalization of higher education due to the pandemic. Before the pandemic, we spent most of the time to persuade our students to go abroad. But since last year, the message has turned into stay home. So many virtual programs were launched in 2020, and most provide few opportunities to engage co-curricular components, inhibiting their possible cultural experience. In that sense, APRU's program design that includes cultural features in a curriculum makes the program more effective. Darcy, as a foreigner in Korea, what do you think contributes to the uniqueness of the Korea University and its student culture?
Well, that's a good question, Mr. Yang. Koreans in general have a strong sense of unity and solidarity. When international students first arrive at Korea University, they're often very surprised at the strong sense of attachment that domestic students have for their alma mater. However, after some time, international students are surprisingly adaptive in understanding the culture and easily become part of the KU community by experiencing college events and by spending time with the domestic students. As you can see in the slide here, by wearing varsity jackets, participating in our rivalry sports games with Yonsei University, and cheerleading and pep rallies, the international students quickly learn how to become part of the community.
So why focus on student culture? Those of you who have had some experience in Korea will know that due to the strong cultural value for education, being a student holds a unique social position. And for this reason, being a student at one of the top universities in the country is even more special. We wanted to give our virtual international students a sense of what this is like to be a KU student, because they might not grasp the cultural differences easily through their online coursework and have no physical interaction with other KU students. Our co-curricular program was meant to give a sense of our unique university culture. So we decided to live stream the event because it allows two-way interaction, a two-way real-time experience, instant feedback and responses, and to use our new student-led broadcasting facilities and experiment with this new format of program delivery. So we delivered the event through a combination of live segments hosted by two of our student ambassadors. They acted like news show anchors. They introduced a series of pre-recorded sessions, including campus tour, student group dance performances, and other experiences to give a sense of life on KU's campus. Also, we had over 400 accumulated views and 35 real-time participants during the broadcast. We also received a number of questions, mostly related to our understanding the Korean cultural relationship between older and younger students, questions about admissions, and some students expressed their desire to continue their study with us again in person when it's possible.
So what did we learn from the experience? Well, we learned that the idea of a live show is excellent, but it's not easy to put together. We had no previous background knowledge about making videos and how the process requires a significant time commitment and attention to content and technology. What we learned from the experience was that blending live and recorded elements worked quite well. This allowed for spontaneity, but also for controlling for certain issues that can affect the production quality, like weather or unexpected situations. We also learned that we relied too much on our student production team for technology. Next time, we'll know better what support they will need from our office to ensure a more professional product, and also to avoid pitfalls typically exist in the process. And finally, the time difference for live events is quite essential. And so it is best to provide on-demand production for participants from other time zones.
Thank you for listening to our presentation. This was what I wanted to share with you about our co-curricular activities. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Darcy and Mr. Yang. Now, a major attraction of the VSC co-curricular activity is the opportunity for students to experience different cultures in the comfort of their own home, because obviously they can't travel. So Tohoku University did that by showing us the real Japan, including the art of sake making. May I invite the team from the Global Learning Center of Tohoku University, led by Professor Rumi Watanabe and her teammates Kia and Elena, to tell us more about their efforts. Professor Watanabe, please.
Thank you, Sherry. Hello, everyone. My name is Rumi Watanabe. Today, me and the other two instructors, Kia and Elena, are going to present our experience at Tohoku University. Okay. First, I'd like to show you the chart where we offered the program. As you see in the chart, we offered 14 sessions in total for 3 months. But ratio of the participant was not so high as we expected, as you may know. And yeah, Japan Expo was a joint program with a regular Tohoku University class. The second one, Discover Real Japan from Home, was a joint program with a regular Tohoku University class and the short program. short program is a Tohoku University Japanese program to study Japanese language and culture. So many participants who are interested in not only Japanese culture, but also Japanese language. The last one, sake lecture and virtual brewery tour, was offered to Tohoku University students as well. About 15 students and the staff from Tohoku University also joined this session. Okay, let me show you the next slide. This is a slide of sake lecture. And in this session, the worker from sake, Japanese sake company called Asahi Shuzo gave a lecture on making sake and drinking etiquette. Of course, we could not taste it, but we shared some kind of sake, about sake. And we received many questions and comments from participants like this, as you see. Okay, next I give you Elena, please.
Hello everyone, my name is Elena, and in this course I talk about Japanese ukiyo-e and Japanism, which was the influence of Japanese print in Western art. And what worked last semester was the clear PowerPoint and the choice of clear images and of famous print or painting or portrait that can attract the student attention and to give some comparison between them. And also to give very simple explanation to the students, and sometimes use both English and Japanese language to make students learn some word in both the languages. And sometimes it was very important also to talk about ukiyo-e in contemporary time, as for example, in the fashion or in Japanese souvenirs. But what we learned that didn't work during this program was, of course, the time differences. And sometimes it was a bit difficult to make students talk. So I suggest to make some simple question for the discussion time and to make the student comfortable to express their opinion and to make question. And for the discussion times, it will be useful to divide them, the student, in small groups. For example, 5 persons for each group to make them talk about the topic. And now, from me is all.
Okay, Kia, please.
Hello everyone, my name is Kia, and I got an opportunity to teach a class about Japanese yokai, which is like a supernatural creature in Japan, in Japanese folklore, like a monsters. And the topic itself was very exciting for students, and they were quite like interested in it. And you can see that on the right side there's a flow of presentation itself. So we try to cover more or less the whole topic, like of introduction wise, like history of it, and we also had some stories to tell, and gender normalization was a good topic, and at the end we had discussion time. For discussion time, I prepared some questions, and then also, like Elena, we divided them into breakout rooms for like 5-6 people at once, and they were like coming up with their own opinions on the topic. What I think went well was that students were very active, but and I say content-wise, I received a comment afterwards from a professor that some slides might have been a bit gruesome. Like, so people who have sensitive physique, like they should be warned about like seeing some kinds of monsters. So I put like a disclaimer slides before those. And also about Q&A, I had my this feeling that students might have come up with their original ideas if they got these questions beforehand as an assignment. Because after the presentation, they were too much influenced with like the content, and they kept like repeating the same ideas like that about monsters, that why women are usually like becoming this evil ghost and stuff. So I think it will be useful to give them an assignment beforehand and then ask them at the discussion time, what did you think on the topic before the presentation and how did your ideas change after that? And discussion time, I think it's good to give like at least like 15-20 minutes, because if people are very interested, they would like to share their opinions and time is quite limited. But other than that, like we also had like this lecture both in Japanese and in English, and we kept like slides like vivid and bright and with minimum text. And at the end, we also shared some like literature on preparing the what books we used to prepare the lecture, and students were very interested in that. So after the class, we might ask you like for the list of literature you used, and it might be very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. From our experience, we learned a lot, and what we learned first is, as many of you understand, not all the applicants showed up. This is because I think some participants face time difference problem or network environment problem, and so on. Second, many students are interested in Japanese culture and language. Those who are studying Japanese language were very happy to speak with Japanese students in Japanese. And yeah, in the future, we are going to offer classes because this is a great opportunity for students to meet people from all over the world and learn many things. Thank you for your attention.
Sorry, I just noticed I've been muted. So thank you, Professor Watanabe. Next, we have Grace Siu from the Career Center of the HKUST. They've been very active in hosting programs to support career development for students. Engaging students from across the world will no doubt really enhance career preparation for our students, particularly during this challenging time. So Grace, please.
Thank you and good day, everyone. My name is Grace. My great pleasure to share my experience when I facilitate these two programs 6 months ago. So I picked these two because they are the most popular ones. They are practical, and yeah, they just, students need that, their portfolio and interview skills. Before, I delivered, to be very honest, I planned, the whole class size, it might be around 120, including APRU friends. It could be the case, but it turned out to be like this. So I have around 400 plus registrants among 13 universities, from undergrads to research postgrads, and you can see the distribution here. And it's a 90-minute program, and the score is like this. So how we measure success, it includes, the interactiveness, how practical is the program, and the fun, that kind of measurements in between. And for this one, not too bad, 241 among 15 universities, and the data is here. My challenge is, as you can imagine, as a trainer, as a presenter, there's no way I can use Zoom meeting because of the scale. And by the way, the show up rate is 80%. So usually the student, they didn't show up. Don't worry, they are from, majority of them, they are from HKUST only. So I'm able to interact with many participants from APRU, and that's fun. So seeing this challenge, how would you deliver this program with such a huge number, that diversity of student backgrounds? I have no choice but to use Zoom webinar. Okay, so that's very practical one-way skills downloading. No game, no breakout room, no polling, no annotate, no YouTube. Okay, just one way, skills download. And I would like to share some critical success factors with all of you this morning, Hong Kong time. I use a studio setup instead of a talking head. So this is a talking head today. But during the show time, I use a studio setup so that students, they can view me. They are like watching a TV program instead of, this usual a trainer and a talking head and then a PowerPoint slide. And this is the studio setup. You can see I have a little bit magic here, the control panel, and you can see the stickers on the ground. And we just make sure that the lighting, everything is perfect, and the overall learning experience is like, oh, this is a TV show. So that's the little tricks here. And you need one program assistant, of course. He or she need to help you to to make sure the Q&A section is effective. And this is the slide in front of the student. So this is a real photo that 6 months ago when I delivered this program. So a trainer, PowerPoint slide, and then a Slido number for them to comment and ask questions. So marketing, from a marketing point of view, critical success factors would be, you need to rename your program and the content according to the latest trend. So I use post-pandemic world. I use beyond 20 whatever, because yes, the employers, their preferences might have changed. And on a CV, you may need to learn how to include virtual intern experience. So this is the new normal. And Clubhouse-alike atmosphere, this one extremely successful. Camera off, anonymous. So students feel safe to ask questions and give comments. And of course, they have an option to disclose, oh, I'm from CUHK and this is my question. Yes, students, they would like to introduce themselves like this. So it's still okay to me. I mean, still effective. I can still deliver and interact with all students, despite it's not in a in a breakout room, it's not camera on. And I would like to emphasize a strong placement at the very beginning to make this program a success. Employability skills, job hunting is something quite cultural specific. So at the very beginning, students from all over the world, I need to emphasize they need to observe the local preferences of their employers, including number of pages on CV, whether a photo is needed or not. For sure, there are different practices all over the world, but I'm going to download my wisdom in Hong Kong from Hong Kong employers' perspective, but to them, they need to adjust accordingly. And of course, from undergrad to postgrad students, they may need to adjust differently on their CV. So this is how I interact with them in the Q&A section. So again, this is a real picture taken a few months ago. So Slido is my good friend to keep everybody engaged. And you can highlight the question like that. That's why I need a program assistant. So highlight the question. And then if to be very honest, if you think the question is inappropriate, your program assistant, he or she could delete any inappropriate comments just in case. But luckily, there was no inappropriate comment, and then we interact with all students very well. And I've got 130 high quality questions asked, and it took me around another almost an hour to KO all questions. So you can see from them, questions like this: what if, anonymous, what if this is my situation, how to handle, and someone respectfully say, oh, I'm sorry because my lecture ended late. So it's okay. I mean, they are interacting with each other and they are inspired by each other's question. So a lot of add-ons and follow-ups, from questions all over the world and from, students from different backgrounds. So this one, I would say, is even more powerful than breakout rooms, if you ask me. So more effective, and students, they can, like the questions and they can, add on and make comments. So what are the few things that I would do differently next time? I may consider to break down the topic into smaller chunks. So in view of the unexpected, overwhelmed questions raised. So it could be, by topics like this. And the next one is more time for Slido Q&A. So more interaction, despite it could be a big crowd, but we could interact, make comments using Slido. And I may also consider to invite participants to answer questions as well, despite their, they could be more senior learners here. So they are from a master's degree program maybe, and when they read a question from an undergrad, actually I can invite the more senior learners to answer the question, and then I add on my comments. It still works, and the whole program and can be even more interactive. And I have to show my contents throughout because many of them add me on LinkedIn later on. This is how I connect with learners all over the world. And that's it for my sharing. And thank you for this opportunity, APRU. Very fun, very enjoyable. And yes, I look forward to deliver more topics to the APRU community. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Grace. We have received so much support from our APRU member universities. And the first university that had offered co-curricular programs for us was Universidad San Francisco de Quito. And they brought together students through social and cultural events. Mateo Sanz, Director of the International Relations Office, will tell us more about this effort. Mateo, please.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much, Charlie, for the introduction. Greetings from Quito, Ecuador. So I'll try to keep it short as well, and then I'll be happy to further discuss in the breakout room. So as Shelby mentioned, our co-extracurricular program was called the Stories from Around the World. And basically, what we tried to do was offer an opportunity for virtual integration between students outside of the classroom. The main objective of this was to develop intercultural skills by engaging in cultural conversations with students from different parts from around the world. So the role of my team was to support USFQ students so they could lead these initiatives. So this was student-led, and the students will have to come out with a different presentation. They will talk about different cultures in Ecuador, so we tried to get students from different backgrounds. And then they will lead different activities through breakout rooms. So overall, the student from USFQ was leading this activity, and the idea was that it would be a conversation between students from all over the world. So we had 4 different themes, which were origins, so where are students from, culinary arts, that could perfectly work with some of the ideas that were shared by some of our colleagues previously, gender and equality. And the final one that I think it's something we could work as well a bit more in the future is campus cultures. We had 4 events. We had a participation of 45 to 50 students in total. I wish I had the metrics as previous presentations, number of registered, number of participants. Obviously, there were more people registered than what they ended up showing up. And each session lasted for 60 minutes. So that's something important to consider. So what we learned, the positive things. So it was interesting to see students leading this. So a little bit of leadership skills there. The student engagement was really, really important for us. So when we break the students into smaller groups, they didn't want to close their conversation. So they were really happy with what they were doing. And the final point was building these new networks. So having the opportunity to learn more about what's going on in Asia, in Australia, North America, other parts of South America as well. What can we improve? I think the evaluation side, and I know this is co-curricular, so we do not think a lot about that, but how do we measure the intercultural skills and what are they learning? So their communication skills, the learning about new cultures, how sensitive they are with this and things like that. And then as well, something that we could improve are the length of sessions. So 60 minutes was a bit short for the students to interact. So I don't know if it was the timing, as we did this about 6 months ago, that students felt that they could just stay longer talking with other peers. So it's just important to consider this. And then as well, the final ideas or what could we work in the future as well are, or the challenges we'll be having. So the first thing to ask ourselves is, how can we do this when we have in-person classes? So how are we going to engage the students back on Zoom or other different platforms when they are on campus? A second thing, we could improve our communication channels. So as I mentioned, there was the student engagement, but we failed in finding a way on how they could connect outside of the Zoom sessions. So perhaps thinking about a Telegram group, WhatsApp group, different sort of groups where the students could interact afterwards, Slack, will be ideas to consider. And then the final thing that we were thinking about with my team were trying to combine these co-curricular activities with something more built, I guess. So having a professor explaining to students or teaching them about storytelling, and then these students, the leaders, will have to come out and just go over the topic selected and build the story in order to share it with the rest of the students. One of the topics that we were considering that could help as well to keep building through the virtual exchange and then hopefully in the future in-person mobility will be campus experiences. So ideally we could have different universities hosting these events. So the training on storytelling and then 3 or 4 universities per semester or something like that will be having their students talking to other students about what's campus life. What's the culture on campus, how are classes, among those sort of things. So that could help as well build us future in-person mobility. So that'll be it from me. I'll be happy to discuss this on the breakout rooms.
Thank you, Mateo. Last but not least, we have Kimberly Bellows and also Janice B from the Global Learning Center Hub of UC Davis, who will tell us about a global learner leadership program that they've developed. And this program is exactly what the VSC envisages to achieve. So Kimberly and Janice, please.
Hi, Shelley, thank you. So we created a Becoming a Global Learner series. Kimberly, can you click on the next slide, please? So I'm just going to give a really quick overview. So for our marketing, we share through internal UC Davis newsletters to students and through APRU for dissemination to other universities. And we garnered a huge amount of interest. We had over 120 applications for roughly 30 spots. So 5 were reserved for UC Davis students and then 1 per APRU member university of the students who applied. The incentive was for participants who attended all 5 sessions would receive a digital certificate signed by the Vice Provost and Dean of Global Affairs, Joanna Rogulska. In terms of planning, we had to be mindful of time differences just because we have students and universities located all over the Pacific Rim. We explicitly stated on the application form and in reminder emails, and we also had the times listed in different time zones to let people know like exactly what time they were expected to attend and the time commitment needed. And then when creating the modules, we also had to be mindful of accessibility and language. So not all participants came from an American educational background or had previous understanding of the terms and concepts we were discussing. Kimberly, can you go to the next slide, please? So a quick overview of the structure. We gave students Canvas access. So Canvas is an online class management platform that's used by course instructors at UC Davis. And we created course modules and uploaded PDFs of the presentations and additional resources for the students to access at any time. And reminders for each of the modules were also sent through Canvas. We had 5 live synchronous modules, which were 90 minutes each, held over the course of 6 weeks. We skipped the date of Chinese New Year. And then we had a small cohort of about 22 students from 17 different universities. The majority of the students actually kept their cameras on throughout each session. We had discussions in small groups and in large groups as well. And we utilized breakout rooms, and we encouraged students to use the chat or to mute themselves and speak up. We kept it pretty informal, just so students could feel comfortable with speaking up. And we also utilized multiple interactive activities. So the 5 different modules were Introduction to Culture, Culture and Values, which is how we make meaning, why we believe what we believe. Culture and Identity, the power we have based on identities. tools for growth in intercultural learning, how to take a step back and evaluate a certain situation and consider alternatives, interpretations for what is happening and why. And then lastly, conflict and culture, where we explored personal conflict styles and how that relates to culture.
Awesome, thanks Janice. So what did we learn from what the students thought? So what was kind of nice was we did weekly surveys and a larger, although not that large, end of program survey. So we have data from 6 surveys, which was really helpful in figuring out, what students thought about this. But mostly today I'm going to talk about the end of program survey because it was very useful. So the positive response that we received from the surveys really echoed what we had heard in meetings. Often students didn't want sessions to end and some would stay back to ask questions. So that was really great. It was great that what we had been hearing throughout the 5 sessions was what we saw in the end of program survey. And it was really great too that we had 20 respondents complete that end of program survey with 20 students participating in 3 or more sessions. What was interesting about the survey was that students really favored the tools for growth and intercultural learning session, the culture and conflict session, and the culture and identity sessions. The tools for growth session really emphasized practical ways to suspend judgment and grow interculturally. Many students commented that in the final survey that the describe, interpret, evaluate activity that we used was really interesting and useful. And the other 2 sessions included interactive guided self-reflection activities. So the impact of these sessions to me indicates that students are looking for practical ways to grow, to learn about themselves and how to interact well with others. So here's a lot of text, I apologize, but the quotes were just too good. So I chose these quotes from our end of program survey because they are representative of other similar comments. Students really appreciated, like I said, practical tools and skills, and also they really wanted to connect and talk with one another. This was said in the welcoming remarks, students, like the response that we got to this session, how many students wanted to participate, how many students continued to show up, and how many students kept their cameras on and engaged in chat and by unmuting themselves was really awesome. We made space for both large group and smaller group discussion, and usually we had to cut off discussion to keep the session moving. Students seem very willing to engage virtually if you create the right space. So we had that smaller group of 20, 22 students. We encouraged both chat and using microphones. And we, as the 3 moderators, our former supervisor was a moderator as well, we responded, we modeled responding to each other's thoughts respectively. So we had a very, like Janice said, an informal and collaborative environment where, giving feedback and responding to each other's thoughts was encouraged. So what follow-up from this? How to keep students engaged? Well, we did invite students to join an email listserv that we created. I'm not sure how much they've used that, but they also used the last few minutes of class of the final module to start their own WhatsApp group. So they took that initiative themselves, which was really great. And we also left it open if they wanted to contact us in the future. We would like to offer this series again, since we were only able to take about 1/5 of the students who applied, and the response during and after the program was so strong. Based on survey responses and workload considerations, we would like to offer it around the same time next year. We think that the adaptations to COVID and the pandemic have shown that there is an appetite and an ability to create spaces for students from many places to have these conversations. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Kimberly and Janice. We're now moving into the Q&A session, but because we're actually very tight on time, I'll just answer some of the questions that came through chat, and then we can use the time during our breakout room to ask questions directly to the presenters. Somebody asked questions about joining and whether the programs are curated by APRU and CUHK. No, we don't really curate the program, but we try to make it. We try to tell everybody that has to be relevant to the VSC. And basically, if you have programs that you'd like to put up, please be in touch with the central office. Alice, my colleague, is here today, and she'll help you to distribute that information. We had a question about, are these only open to students? Actually, no, they're open to staff. We've had recently CUHK did a cooking event, and we had quite a few staff members from, colleagues from around the network joining that event also. There was a question about, managing the different time zones. I think that's a difficult one, but in a sense, sometimes it depends on your event. If your event, let's say, is one that requires you to be outdoors, for example, the Career U event, it needs to be during the day. But what I wanted to say is that, we hosted Chinese University hosted an event, a campus tour recently, and it was during our daytime. It was actually in the morning. And we opened it to our partner universities. And we had students from Europe joining, and it was 4 o'clock in the morning. So I think for students, they're another breed to us. And if they're interested, they will turn up irrespective of the time of the day. So hopefully, for students, time zone difference isn't a big issue after all. Jackie, did you have anything else you want to add?
No, just as we're running tight on time, so we're just going to keep the rest of the session tight. And so we'll just go ahead and go straight into the breakout session. Anya, would you mind sharing your screen, please? So we're going to have 4 breakout rooms, and they're going to be focused on each of the kind of focus areas of the co-curricular activities. We're going to have culture, career, social, and leadership. And so we've already broken up everyone into their respective breakout rooms. The culture session will be led by Korean University and Tohoku University. We'll also have Alice from CUHK who will join and help to record the session. And we'll have HKUST and Jonas from CUHK lead the career session. Mr. Mateo Sainz from USFQ and myself to lead the social section. And UC Davis and Shelly Fan from CUHK to lead the leadership section. So we'll have 20 minutes to break out, and there'll be a countdown clock in your upper right-hand corner. So please pay attention to that as we are running tight on time and we want to make sure to maximize our time together. Please identify a rapporteur from each of your groups to give the report back. And please do that at the beginning of your session before you get started on the conversation. And then we'll have, instead of 2 minutes, each group will have 1 minute to report back. And then when you get back into the room, there'll be a countdown at the end of your session to remind you that the session is closing down, and we'll return back to the main room for the closing remarks. So let's go ahead. We're going to have these guiding questions. So there's 3 guiding questions that we'd like you to discuss in your session. They are, what are some of the lessons that are particularly relevant to your category? So cultural, leadership, career, social, that could be around, time zones or the technical support, activity planning, engagement with students, for example. And then the second question we'd like you to consider is, what are the recommendations that you have in organizing these activities for the future? It would be really particularly helpful for us at APRU and at the central office to understand what these recommendations might be and how we can adjust them in the future. And then finally, we want to really understand how we can measure success. I think Mr. Mateo Sainz brought this up in his presentation. We really want to see how are we installing these cultural competencies for the students, and how can we include that measurement in our session. So these are the 3 questions. We will also highlight them in the broadcast for each breakout session, so you don't have to remember them or memorize them. So Anya, please go ahead and get us in the breakout rooms. Sorry to have to cut some of your conversation short. I know that we were in the middle of a sentence there. So just glad to have you all back into the main session. Welcome back. Do we have everyone back into the room? Okay. So I'm just going to go ahead and we're looking to try to stay on time as much as possible. So I'm just gonna go ahead and call on our first group. I think it was the culture group led by Korea University and Tohoku.
So I will be a reporter for first group, for culture group, and we had a very fruitful discussion. And Korean University said that one of the challenges was to produce an online video, something that they weren't cut to provide an online content beforehand, and that was quite hard. But they are dedicated to continue it next semester as well, maybe in a separate program. And especially with students being really interested in Korean culture, it would be nice to provide them topics easier packaged for this format. And California Riverside University actually had 10 TED workshops in 10 consecutive weeks, and approached different topics with a lot of speakers and stuff. And they even had a certificate giving of completion given to people, and they loved it. And I guess as a recommendation for organizing this kind of events in the future, it should be easier package for the format of online, and maybe have a separate program as a niche for creating a niche for students who are not able financially or otherwise to come and actually join universities exchange students. And it would be nice to provide an opportunity to take classes, and also to be very helpful for them to get a taste of what it's like to study in that university before choosing the program to come and study, if those are their plans. And also maybe how to success the measure would be how to measure the success would be to maybe looking at the number of likes and views, and providing surveys to analyze the results and the overall satisfaction of participants. And participation in the class is also a big thing, because students are very excited about learning the new culture, and for them it will be might be a good opportunity. And also we thought that some virtual programs like TED classes and stuff, they were popular before the pandemic. So even after things are back to normal, why shouldn't we continue? And each university will maybe decide on their own how to do it. But most of us were very optimistic about continuing this program even afterwards. I hope I covered it all. Thank you.
Thank you. That was very succinct and good report back. I'm sure that was a very rich discussion. Then we'll go ahead and go to our career group led by HKUST.
So hi everyone. So I'll just go in order of the questions. So some of the lessons learned were, of course, the expert knowledge and making sure we keep up to date with the times, especially right now with COVID, but also getting students to think about planning ahead for their career and the job prospects in the future. Student attendance is also important for this kind of activity. We want to make sure that we do have the high registration rates and participation as well, and just so it's relevant for students, and whether it is a plus for their program, something extra that is beneficial, or if it's compulsory, but trying to tailor for both audiences. The timing is also really important. Grace mentioned that usually they have a job fair at HKUST in October. So either planning it during the start of semester or a time of semester, or during the year where employability may be quite important, or if it's coming close to graduation and students need to prepare, then that could be an ideal time as well. Other things that were mentioned include the content and the relevance for students, and also getting them to think not just from their own perspective, but what would an employer think? And also just keeping in mind the tools and platforms that you use. So obviously Grace talked about Slido as a really engaging way to get students to ask questions or share their ideas and comments. When looking ahead for preparing such activities, I'm thinking about the team and resources behind it. So Grace also showed in her presentation how their setup looked like a media studio. So it was a little bit like a TV program. So having something like that in place could make it more engaging for students, as if they're tuning in to a show rather than just someone at an office space. And also just making sure that we keep up with the trends and whatever is relevant at the time for students. And finally, just regarding measuring success, participation rate, registration rate, also the student interaction, and I guess their willingness to to turn on their cameras and talk and engage and answer the questions. And finally, student feedback from the program. Obviously, if you run surveys or have a focus group or discussions, then you can really ascertain the value that students picked up from the program. And that's just wrapping up from the career side.
Great, thank you. Some very valuable points there. I think that we can all consider not only just for the career section, but for all of these types of co-curricular activities. Next, we'll go to the social section led by USFQ.
So Shirley will be reporting.
Okay, so we discuss about the 3 areas. The first one is the lessons. So we think the student-led component is very important, and we should enhance student-to-student communications. The second one, we also think is very useful that we provide connections for students. They can learn from each other. For example, they can learn some career skills from fellows. For the recommendations, we think there are 2. One is, the first one is we can build channels for the students can set up WhatsApp groups or Telegram groups. They can keep communicating with each other. The second one is probably APRU can set up, build short-term programs, 2 or 3 every year. Like in winter, December, the students can go to Japan, or in summer, they can go to Australia, Hong Kong, something like that. For measures, this is very difficult and a challenge. We don't have exactly answer, but we think we can think about how to use the measures, because this information can improve us for next workshops in the future, or we use this like report in the reports. We also think we can learn from what we see, the students, the efforts, and what they have contribute to the workshops. Probably this is what we can measure a little bit. Yeah, that's all from our group. Thank you.
Thank you, Shirley. I think I was a part of this group as well, and I think one thing that came out of this is that the social group is a very unique one, and that we have to think about not only the students' engagement at the particular workshop, but beyond that, if we're trying to be successful in maintaining these social connections. Next, we'll go to the leadership group by UC Davis.
Yeah, so in our group, we talked about possibility in the future of like 2 universities collaborating or co-working together to develop co-curricular programs, because that could lead to diversity in the students. And we also learned that, in general, students really crave engagement, and that was a commonality we had with, someone from the University of Auckland shared. Students, they want discussion-based, interesting topics. And when you have something like this, then there's a lower attrition rate. Having a variety of activities during the session. So something that's not pre-recorded, not a lecture. I don't think students don't want to feel like they're in another class, I think. And then with the leadership aspect, there's a lot of self-reflection, what does it mean, to be me? Students, they really want to have that aspect and being intentional to have the interaction between students. I think it's a unique opportunity for students to like be able to connect with so many others from different universities and different countries. Sustainability, collaboration and accessibility are two key factors, since not everyone can go overseas. And then like maybe in the future, it's a possibility to do a hybrid model. And I mean, leadership is just is going to continue to be an important thing in students' minds, you know, for personal development and career development. But yeah, that's what we have to share from our breakout session.
Great, thank you everyone for your report back. We are just a minute or two behind. I just want to wrap up by saying that there's a couple of themes that I've noticed were that the technology was particularly important. So thinking about how we prepare for our sessions, either by preparing pre-recorded materials and making videos, and even having like a really nice setup within your webinar would really help to engage students and get them to keep coming back, especially for those ones that have more than one session. Some measurements or some other incentives that I saw were certificates, connections to industry, or like career opportunities. And then also that this program would be valuable to students, regardless of if COVID was happening or not. This could be an entryway to thinking about international exchange for the future. This could also be an avenue for those students that are not able to travel abroad, don't have the accessibility in terms of money and support. So I think that this would be particularly valuable to many more students than just those that can travel abroad. Another thing that I saw that was important is that we need to continue to think about measurements of success. So there could be additional tools that we could add to our conversations that would enrich the students' experiences, measure what they're getting out of it. So looking at how to capture what they're learning through these sessions. And that another big theme that I noticed was that student-led activities are really important. The students are craving this engagement. They're craving the leadership skills that they don't get in the classroom. So these are ways that we can supplement their learning beyond what they're getting in their traditional classroom. So Shelly, did you have any other themes that you wanted to raise as topics that came through?
No, Jackie, I think you've covered almost all of the points that I've put together. So thank you.
Well, again, I thank everyone for coming today, and we really appreciate all of the universities that have presented and that are participating actively in the VSC program. If you do have questions about participating in the future, please do contact myself or Shelly. We are, open to answering any questions and to engaging more. I think that this is really proved to be a very valuable program in the last year during COVID. And we look to engaging more in the future. So thank you again for coming today, and we'll look to follow up with you soon.
Thank you, Jackie.